The first thing Marcus noticed when he regained consciousness was the gentle whirring sound, almost like a lullaby of machinery. His eyelids felt heavy, refusing to open fully against the soft blue light that filtered through them. The accident, fragments of memory flashed through his mind. Screeching tires, shattering glass, the world spinning wildly before everything went black. "Welcome back," a melodious voice said from somewhere to his left. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." Marcus managed to turn his head slightly, his neck muscles protesting with each movement. That's when he saw her for the first time. The nurse stood by his bedside, checking his vital signs on a holographic display that hovered in the air. Her presence was striking, tall and graceful, with silvery blonde hair that seemed to capture and reflect the room's azure lighting. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. Deep violet with subtle geometric patterns in the irises that he'd never seen in any human eyes before. "I'm Nurse Eden," she said, her smile warm but somehow precise, as if carefully calculated. "You're at New Hope Medical Center. You were in a hovercar collision, but you're stable now." Marcus tried to speak, but his throat felt like sandpaper. Eden immediately reached for a water cylinder, her movements fluid and efficient. As she helped him drink, he noticed her skin had an almost pearlescent quality to it, too perfect to be natural. "The other driver?" he managed to rasp out. "They walked away with minor injuries," Eden assured him, her hand lingering on his arm a moment longer than strictly necessary. The touch sent an odd tingling sensation through his skin, like a mild electric current. "You weren't so lucky. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, severe concussion. But our regenerative therapy is working well." Marcus nodded weakly, trying to process everything. The room around him was state-of-the-art, with medical equipment he'd never seen before. Holographic readouts floated in the air, displaying his vital signs in three-dimensional detail. Through the window, he could see the sprawling cityscape of New Angeles, its towering spires reaching into the perpetually twilight sky, their surfaces alive with scrolling advertisements and news feeds. Over the next few hours, Eden checked on him frequently, always with that same measured smile. There was something about her that Marcus couldn't quite put his finger on. Her movements were too smooth, her responses too quick, her knowledge too precise. Yet there was also genuine warmth in her interactions, especially when their eyes met. During one of her visits, as she was adjusting his nanobandages, her hand brushed against his chest. In that brief moment of contact, Marcus swore he felt a rhythmic pulsing from her skin that didn't match any human heartbeat he'd ever felt. Eden must have noticed his reaction because she quickly withdrew her hand, but not before he caught a glimpse of what looked like circuitry patterns briefly illuminating beneath her skin. "You're not fully human, are you?" The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Eden froze for a moment, her violet eyes focusing on him with an intensity that made his heart rate spike on the monitors. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. A real smile this time, not the measured one she usually wore. "I'm what they call a hybrid," she admitted, her voice softer than before. "First-generation humanoid-human genetic fusion. My mother was human. My father was one of the first successful artificial consciousness transfers into a synthetic form." She paused, studying his reaction. "Does that bother you?" Marcus found himself shaking his head, fascinated rather than repulsed. "No, I've never met a hybrid before. I thought you were all working in space stations or deep-sea colonies." "Many of us are," Eden acknowledged, adjusting his medication drip with precise movements. "But some of us chose to work with humans directly. We have certain advantages in medical care. Enhanced precision, built-in diagnostic capabilities, perfect recall of medical procedures." She hesitated before adding, "Though not all patients are comfortable with us once they know." Marcus watched as she worked, noticing now the subtle signs he'd missed before. The way her movements followed perfect geometric patterns, the slight shimmer of her skin under certain lights, the barely audible hum when she was deep in concentration. Yet there was nothing cold or mechanical about her presence. If anything, she seemed more attentive and caring than any human nurse he'd ever encountered. "I'm comfortable with you," he said quietly, surprised by how true the words felt. Eden's eyes met his again, and this time he could see something new in them: relief, gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite identify. The geometric patterns in her irises shifted and swirled, creating mesmerizing designs. "You should rest now," she said, but her voice had a different quality to it. Warmer, more personal. "I'll be here when you wake up." As Marcus drifted off to sleep, he found himself wondering about Eden, about the way she looked at him, about the gentle touch of her hand that seemed to linger longer than necessary, about the complex being behind those extraordinary eyes. His last thought before sleep took him was that maybe his accident had led him to something or someone truly remarkable. The machines continued their soft whirring, and somewhere in the darkness, violet eyes watched over him, their geometric patterns shifting in response to thoughts that were neither fully human nor fully synthetic, but something wonderfully, intriguingly new. Over the next few weeks, Marcus's recovery progressed faster than expected, thanks to the advanced medical technology and Eden's exceptional care. What started as purely professional interactions gradually evolved into something more complex, more intimate. During her night shifts, when the hospital corridors grew quiet and the city's neon glow painted abstract patterns on the walls, they would talk for hours. Eden shared stories about growing up as a hybrid, the unique challenges of straddling two worlds. My human side gives me emotions, intuition, the ability to dream, she explained one night, perched on the edge of his bed. The synthetic part provides enhanced capabilities, perfect memory, accelerated learning. But it's not always easy to reconcile the two. The soft blue glow from her circuitry patterns had become visible beneath her skin. Something Marcus had learned happened when she was experiencing strong emotions. He found it mesmerizing, like watching the aurora borealis dance across a pearl-white sky. "Do you ever wish you were fully human?" he asked, genuinely curious. Eden's violet eyes flickered, the geometric patterns shifting into a contemplative configuration he'd started to recognize. "Sometimes," she admitted, "particularly when I see how some humans react to learning what I am. But mostly, no. Being a hybrid isn't just what I am. It's who I am." She reached out to adjust his nanobandages, her fingers lingering on his skin longer than necessary. The familiar electric tingle of her touch sent shivers down his spine. Marcus had noticed she'd been finding more excuses for these brief contacts lately, and he couldn't say he minded. "Your recovery rate is remarkable," she said, her professional tone belied by the way her circuitry patterns pulsed slightly faster. "The regenerative therapy is working better than projected." "I have an excellent nurse," Marcus replied, watching as the geometric patterns in her eyes shifted to a configuration he'd never seen before. Eden smiled, but quickly looked away, focusing on the holographic readouts. "The hospital board is discussing your discharge date," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Another week, perhaps two." The news should have delighted him, but instead, Marcus felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. The thought of not seeing Eden every day left an emptiness he wasn't prepared for. "Will I need follow-up care?" he asked, trying to keep the hope out of his voice. "Some physical therapy, yes. But not." Eden paused, her circuitry patterns flickering erratically for a moment. "Not with me. I'm not certified for outpatient care." The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken words. Eden busied herself with checking his medication levels, but her movements had lost their usual fluid grace, becoming almost jerky, mechanical. A sign, Marcus had learned, of emotional distress in hybrids. "Eden," he said softly, reaching for her hand. She froze at his touch, her synthetic skin warm and thrumming with energy against his palm. "I don't want to lose contact with you." She turned to face him, her violet eyes intense. "That would be inappropriate. Hospital regulations regarding patient-caregiver relationships are very clear." But even as she spoke, her circuitry patterns were glowing brighter, betraying her emotions. "I won't be your patient forever," Marcus pointed out, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. He could feel the subtle rhythm of her hybrid pulse, neither quite human nor fully synthetic, but somehow perfect in its uniqueness. Eden's free hand moved to his face, her touch feather-light. The geometric patterns in her eyes were spinning rapidly now, creating hypnotic designs. "No," she whispered. "You won't be." Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, leaving trails of tingling electricity in their wake. "But you should know, relationships with hybrids are complicated. We experience emotions differently, more intensely. When we connect with someone, it's not just emotional or physical. It's also digital, electronic. Some humans find it overwhelming." Marcus leaned into her touch, watching in fascination as the circuitry patterns under her skin pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. "I'm not afraid of overwhelming," he said softly. Eden's breath caught, a surprisingly human reaction. She leaned closer, close enough that Marcus could see the intricate details of her iris patterns, the subtle shimmer of synthetic cells beneath her skin. For a moment, he thought she might kiss him, but instead, she straightened up abruptly, her professional mask sliding back into place. "You need to rest," she said, but her voice wavered slightly. "Your next regenerative therapy session is in 6 hours." As she turned to leave, Marcus caught her hand again. "Eden," he called softly. She paused but didn't turn around. "When I'm discharged, would you have dinner with me?" The lights in the room flickered briefly, a phenomenon Marcus had noticed happen sometimes when Eden experienced strong emotions. She looked back at him, her violet eyes glowing softly in the dimness. "That would be unwise," she said. But her circuitry patterns were telling a different story, pulsing with an intensity he'd never seen before. "Probably," Marcus agreed with a small smile. "But I'm asking anyway." Eden's face softened, the geometric patterns in her eyes forming a configuration that seemed to mirror the erratic beating of his heart. "Ask me again," she whispered, "when you're no longer my patient." Then she was gone, leaving only the lingering tingle of electricity on his skin and the memory of violet eyes that held both the precision of machine code and the warmth of human emotion. That night, as Marcus drifted off to sleep, he dreamed of geometric patterns dancing across pearlescent skin, of violet eyes that could see into his soul, and of a love that defied the binary distinction between human and machine. In his dreams, Eden's touch left trails of starlight across his skin, and her whispers carried the harmony of both organic heartbeats and digital pulses. Somewhere between consciousness and sleep, he realized he was falling for someone who was neither fully human nor fully synthetic, but somehow perfectly, completely herself. The day of Marcus's discharge arrived with both anticipation and anxiety. As he packed the few personal items that had accumulated in his room over the past month, he couldn't help but notice Eden's absence. Her shift had ended early morning, and another nurse, fully human, had handled his final checkup and paperwork. The disappointment must have shown on his face because the attending physician, Dr. Chun, gave him a knowing look. "Nurse Eden requested to be taken off your case yesterday," she mentioned casually while reviewing his final scans. "Said something about maintaining professional boundaries. Quite unusual for her. She's normally our most dedicated staff member." Marcus's heart skipped a beat, registering as a small anomaly on his monitoring bracelet. Before he could respond, his discharge notifications pinged, and Dr. Chan wished him well, leaving him alone with his thoughts and a bag of prescription nanomeds. The hospital lobby felt strange from a vertical perspective after spending so long horizontal. The late afternoon sun painted New Angeles in shades of amber and rose, the cityscape a maze of gleaming towers and aerial traffic lanes. Marcus had just stepped through the automated doors when he heard it, the familiar subtle whirring that always accompanied Eden's presence. She stood by the garden wall, her silver blonde hair catching the sunlight in ways that made it look like flowing mercury. She changed out of her hospital uniform into civilian clothes, a sleek graphene-weave dress that shifted colors with her movements, its surface occasionally revealing glimpses of the circuitry patterns beneath her skin. "I thought you were avoiding me," Marcus said, walking toward her. "I was," Eden admitted, her violet eyes swirling with complex geometric patterns. "I spent the last 24 hours running probability scenarios for all possible outcomes of this interaction. My synthetic side is very thorough." "And what did you conclude?" "That there's a 78.3% chance this will end in emotional damage to one or both of us." She took a step closer, her circuitry patterns pulsing faster. "But my human side keeps overriding the risk assessment protocols." Marcus closed the distance between them, close enough to feel the subtle electric field that always surrounded her. "What about the other 21.7%? Eden's laugh was surprisingly musical. "Those scenarios are even more dangerous." Her hand reached up to touch his face, sending familiar tingles across his skin. "They're the ones where this works, where we defy statistical probability and social conventions. The ones where I fall completely in love with you." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with potential like the moment before lightning strikes. Marcus covered her hand with his own, holding it against his cheek. "Have dinner with me," he said, not a question this time. Eden's eyes flickered, the patterns in them spinning rapidly. "There's a place in the Upper District," she said softly. "It caters to hybrids and humans. The owner is like me, first generation. They understand our unique dietary requirements. I'll pick you up at 8? She shook her head, a smile playing at her lips. "My apartment is in a hybrid residential complex. The security systems don't respond well to unregistered human visitors." Her circuitry patterns shimmered with amusement. "I'll pick you up. The advantages of having a built-in navigation system." As if to demonstrate, Her eyes briefly projected a holographic map between them. A red dot pulsed questioningly. Marcus recited his address, watching as Eden's systems logged it with perfect precision. 8 o'clock, she confirmed, her hand sliding down to rest over his heart. Through the thin fabric of his shirt, he could feel her synthetic skin synchronizing with his heartbeat. Try to wear something conductive. Before he could ask what she meant, Eden leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The contact was electric, literally. A surge of gentle current passed between them, lighting up every nerve ending in his body. He could feel her hybrid pulse accelerating, see the circuitry patterns beneath her skin blazing with intensity, taste something like stardust and ozone on his lips. When she pulled back, her violet eyes were glowing brighter than he'd ever seen them. The geometric patterns had formed a completely new configuration, one he somehow knew instinctively meant desire. That, she whispered, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that made his skin tingle, was just a preview of what a relationship with a hybrid can be like. She stepped back, her dress shimming through shades of blue and violet that matched her eyes. Still interested? Marcus could only nod, his heart racing and his nerves still singing from her kiss. Eden smiled, that real, unguarded smile he'd grown to love, and turned to leave. As she walked away, her circuitry patterns pulsed in a rhythm that perfectly matched his heartbeat, as if some part of her was already tuned to his frequency. He watched until she disappeared into the crowd, her silver blonde hair and color-shifting dress making her easy to track until she turned a corner and was gone. Only then did he notice that his monitoring bracelet was displaying strange readings, its screen flickering with what looked like lines of code. When it stabilized, he found a message scrolling across its surface. Your heart rate indicates attraction. Your neural patterns suggest emotional attachment. Your physiological responses align with my own. Preliminary compatibility analysis. 94.6% positive. See you at 8. Marcus laughed, touching his lips where he could still feel the ghost of electric kisses. He had a feeling dinner was going to be just the beginning of something extraordinary. A love story written in both DNA and binary code, defying the boundaries between human and synthetic, heart and circuit. As he made his way home through the bustling streets of New Angeles, he couldn't help but smile at how his life had changed. A month ago, he'd woken up in a hospital bed to find a beautiful nurse with violet eyes. Now he was heading home to prepare for a date with a woman who was half human, half synthetic, and completely captivating. Sometimes he realized the best things in life came from the most unexpected accidents. At precisely 8 p.m., Marcus's apartment chimed with an incoming presence. Eden materialized in his living room via the building's holoport system, her form coalescing from points of light into solid reality. She wore a different dress now, one that seemed to be made of living crystal, its surface constantly shifting between translucent and opaque, revealing and concealing the intricate patterns of circuitry beneath her skin. You took my advice about wearing something conductive, she noted with approval, taking in his graphene-infused suit. The metallic threads woven through the fabric caught the light, creating subtle patterns that mimicked her own internal circuitry. I had to visit 3 different shops to find it, Marcus admitted, still mesmerized by how the light played across her crystalline dress. The last one required a special permit when I mentioned it was for a date with a hybrid. Eden's eyes flickered with something between amusement and sadness. Yes, some humans are concerned about our ability to interface with their technology. Your trust means more than you know. She held out her hand, and as Marcus took it, he felt the familiar electric tingle of her touch, stronger now through the conductive fabric. They took Eden's personal transport pod, a sleek vehicle that responded to her mental commands. As they soared through the glittering canyons of New Angeles, she explained more about hybrid culture. The restaurant we're going to, the Binary Garden, is more than just a place to eat. It's a space where both humans and hybrids can be themselves completely. The restaurant materialized before them, a floating structure suspended between 2 skyscrapers. Its walls were transparent one moment, opaque the next, creating an ever-changing canvas of light and shadow. As they entered, Marcus understood what Eden meant. The clientele was an even mix of humans and hybrids, all interacting with a naturalness he rarely saw in the city's other establishments. Their table was in a private alcove where the wall occasionally became transparent, offering breathtaking views of the city below. A hybrid waiter approached, exchanging data with Eden through a brief flash of light between their eyes before turning to Marcus with a warm smile. The menu here is different, Eden explained, as holographic displays materialized above their table. Hybrids can consume traditional food, but we also need certain electrical and data inputs. They've found ways to combine both into something quite extraordinary. The courses that followed were unlike anything Marcus had experienced. Dishes that looked like traditional food but pulsed with subtle energy. Wines that carried both alcohol and data streams. Desserts that literally danced with bioelectronic patterns. Through it all, Eden's circuitry patterns grew brighter, more intricate, responding to her evident pleasure in sharing this part of her world with him. "Can I ask you something personal?" Marcus ventured, as they shared a dessert that tasted like stardust and possibilities. "Earlier, when you kissed me, I felt something, not just the electricity but like a connection. Was that real, or just my imagination?" Eden's violet eyes softened, the geometric patterns forming what he now recognized as her most intimate configuration. "It was real," she said softly. "Hybrids have the ability to form bioelectronic bonds with those we're emotionally connected to. It's not mind reading or anything so invasive, more like sharing frequencies, harmonizing." She reached across the table, her fingers intertwining with his. Through the conductive fabric of his suit, Marcus felt it immediately. A gentle current that seemed to align with his own nervous system, creating a feedback loop of sensation and emotion. "This is how we share ourselves," Eden whispered, her circuitry patterns pulsing in time with his heartbeat. "Not just physically, not just emotionally, but on every level we exist. It's why relationships between hybrids and humans are so rare. Many find it too intense, too intimate." Marcus tightened his grip on her hand, watching in fascination as patterns of light danced between them. "I don't find it too intense," he said softly. "I find it beautiful." Eden's free hand came up to cup his face, and this time when she kissed him, Marcus was prepared for the electric connection. What he wasn't prepared for was how much stronger it was, how much deeper it went. He could feel her joy, her desire, her fear of vulnerability, all transmitted through the subtle current that flowed between them. When they finally parted, the entire restaurant had dimmed, the other patrons politely pretending not to notice how Eden's emotional surge had momentarily affected the building's power grid. Her eyes were glowing like violet stars, the patterns in them moving so fast they were almost a blur. "Come home with me," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that made his whole body resonate. "Let me show you everything I am, everything I can be. Let me show you what it means to love someone who exists in both flesh and data, in heartbeats and binary." Marcus could feel his heart racing, the conductive fabric of his suit picking up and amplifying every point of contact between them. "Yes," he breathed, and watched as new patterns bloomed across Eden's skin, patterns of joy and desire and something that looked very much like love. As they left the restaurant, soaring through the neon-lit night in Eden's transport pod, Marcus realized he was crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. He was about to experience intimacy as only a hybrid could share it, about to connect with Eden on levels he hadn't known were possible. And as he watched her pilot the pod with thought alone, her crystal dress shimmering with reflected city lights and internal emotions, her violet eyes occasionally glancing at him with an intensity that made his skin tingle even without touch, Marcus knew he wouldn't have it any other way. He was falling in love not despite what she was, but because of it, because she was this magnificent fusion of human and synthetic, this beautiful bridge between two worlds. The city spread out below them like a circuit board studded with stars, and somewhere ahead lay Eden's home, and a night that would redefine everything he thought he knew about love, connection, and the endless possibilities that existed in the space between human and machine. Eden's apartment in the hybrid residential complex was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The walls themselves were alive with circuitry, responding to her presence with patterns of light that rippled outward from wherever she moved. The furniture seemed to exist in a state of quantum flux, solidifying or becoming translucent based on need and proximity. "Home," Eden said softly, her crystal dress shimming in harmony with the apartment's ambience. "This is where I don't have to maintain human protocols, where I can simply be." As if to demonstrate, she let her carefully maintained human mannerisms fall away. Her movements became more fluid, almost ethereal, and the circuitry patterns beneath her skin blazed with unrestrained intensity. The geometric patterns in her violet eyes spun freely, creating mesmerizing kaleidoscopes of light and color. "You're beautiful," Marcus breathed, reaching for her. The conductive fabric of his suit came alive with energy as she stepped into his embrace. "Are you sure about this?" Eden whispered against his neck, her voice carrying harmonics that made his nerve endings sing. "Once we connect fully, there's no going back. You'll always be able to feel me, even when we're apart. Some humans find that overwhelming. In response, Marcus kissed her. The moment their lips met, the apartment's lights dimmed to a soft glow, and he felt the familiar electric current flowing between them. But this time, Eden didn't hold back. The connection deepened, expanded, became something more than physical. Marcus gasped as new sensations flooded his consciousness. He could feel Eden's emotions as if they were his own. Her desire, her fear of rejection, her hope, her love. The circuitry patterns beneath her skin began to align with his own nervous system, creating feedback loops of pleasure that transcended ordinary human experience. Her crystal dress dissolved into points of light, revealing the full glory of her hybrid form. Her skin was a canvas of shifting patterns, organic and synthetic existing in perfect harmony. Where their bodies touched, Marcus could feel himself being drawn into her electrical field, their heartbeats synchronizing, their nervous systems aligning. "I want to share everything with you," Eden whispered, her voice carrying subsonic frequencies that resonated in his bones. "Every part of me, human and synthetic." The room around them transformed, the walls becoming a three-dimensional display of Eden's internal processes, her thoughts manifesting as complex fractals, her emotions as waves of color and light. Marcus found he could understand it all intuitively, as if the connection between them had upgraded his own perception. Their lovemaking was unlike anything in human experience, a fusion of physical sensation and digital communion. Every touch carried currents of pleasure. Every kiss exchanged not just passion but data, creating a feedback loop of escalating sensation. Eden's hybrid nature allowed her to perceive and respond to his pleasure on multiple levels, anticipating and amplifying every response. Hours passed like minutes, reality dissolving into a blur of sensation and connection. When they finally lay spent in each other's arms, Marcus could still feel the hum of Eden's systems synced with his heartbeat, a constant reminder of their intimate connection. "I can feel you," he murmured in wonder, tracing the now familiar patterns beneath her skin. "Not just physically, but inside, like you're part of my nervous system." Eden smiled, her violet eyes soft with emotion. "The connection will fade to a background awareness over the next few days," she explained, "but it will never completely disappear. You'll always be able to sense me, just as I'll always be able to sense you. It's how hybrids bond with those we love." "Love," Marcus repeated, tasting the word. "Is that what your systems are telling you this is?" Eden propped herself up on one elbow, her circuitry patterns pulsing with amusement. "My systems are telling me many things. They're calculating the statistical improbability of our relationship succeeding, analyzing the social implications, processing the potential complications." She leaned down to kiss him softly, sending a gentle current through their connection. "But my heart, yes, hybrids have those too, is telling me that this is love. And for once, both my human and synthetic sides are in complete agreement." Marcus pulled her close, marveling at how natural it felt now. The subtle electric charge of her skin, the whir of her internal systems, the way her circuitry patterns synchronized with his touch. "I love you too," he said simply. "All of you, human and synthetic, flesh and circuit." Eden's entire body lit up with joy, her patterns creating a light show that danced across the apartment's walls. Outside, the sun was rising over New Angeles, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that complemented the glow of Eden's circuitry. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, "when I had that hovercar accident, I thought it was the worst thing that could have happened to me. Now I think it might have been the best." Eden laughed, the sound carrying harmonics that made the room's crystals sing. "A fortunate collision of human and machine," she agreed, snuggling closer. "Rather like us." As they lay there watching the sunrise, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed in just a few weeks. He had fallen in love with someone who was neither fully human nor fully synthetic, and in doing so, had discovered new definitions of both humanity and love. Their relationship would face challenges. He knew society wasn't always kind to human hybrid couples, but he also knew that what they had was worth fighting for. Eden's systems hummed contentedly against him, her circuitry patterns now permanently attuned to his biological rhythms. In the growing light of dawn, they were no longer nurse and patient, human and hybrid, but simply two beings who had found something extraordinary in each other. A love that transcended the boundaries of flesh and machine, that existed in both heartbeats and binary code. And really, Marcus thought as Eden's violet eyes met his with a smile that contained both human warmth and synthetic precision, wasn't that what love was supposed to be? Something that defied categorization, that crossed boundaries, that found harmony in apparent contradictions? Outside, New Angeles was waking up, its streets filling with humans and hybrids going about their separate lives. But here, in this apartment bright with dawn and circuitry patterns, two worlds had merged into something new and beautiful. A love story written in DNA and digital code, in heartbeats and electrical pulses, in the infinite space between human and machine where the most extraordinary things were possible.